Okay, so according to the list, the third perfection, and there is something about this perfection that really touches my heart, but perhaps I can say that about all of them. Dana really means a lot to me. I think to understand it properly is a sign of deep wisdom. Uh, and then coming out of that is deep love. Dana and love are connected together because we engage in the fearless state. And sila, to live in a way that does not bring harm to yourself or to others. Well, how beautiful is that? That we can live, I suppose, what we would call a quiet life, where our intention is to create as little harm as possible to the planet and everything that lives on the planet. You know, this is the only home we've got. We speak about flying off to Mars to build colonies there, but whatever we need on Mars, we have to take from the Earth. We have to take oxygen and water and then the food. So I think better if we just stay here and take care of this place. So there's that. And then we come to the third one, which is Nekhamma. Nekhamma is translated as, now I always say this, it's translated as. That doesn't mean that's the accurate translation. It's just it's a simplification. It's a replacement of one word from one language with another word from another language. So we have to take a little bit of care around these things always. But Nekhamma means renunciation. And traditionally, I think it is true that our idea of renunciation, if we've been involved in Buddhism, for example, and we go to monasteries, we meet monks or we meet nuns, they're actually called renunciates. They've given up the worldly life. That's the idea of it. And they've gone to live, traditionally, they've gone to live in quiet sort of forest areas. That was the original idea from the Buddha. You know, he organized this social level of bhikkhu, of what we now call monk. It's not really a monk. A bhikkhu and a bhikkhuni, bhikkhuni is female, bhikkhu, that's all. So they're exactly the same. And what it means is a bhikkhu or bhikkhuni is someone who meditates. So that's one thing. And so to meditate, ultimately, you don't need any special things at all. But at the beginning, silence in a peaceful environment is let's say, useful. As you progress, you don't need special conditions. When I was training, I worked for some time. It was a job I liked very much, actually. And I worked for some time in a swimming baths, a public swimming pool in Cardiff in South Wales. And I had 3 jobs there. So 2 days a week I would do one job, 2 days a week I would do another job, and 1 day a week I would do the third job. And I liked all of them, actually. But one of the 2-day jobs was as what we would call in English a boiler man. So it was my responsibility to turn these big boilers on in the morning to heat the premises, to heat the water, etc., and then to make sure they worked all day and they didn't break down. Not that I could do anything if they did. I only had to phone someone, but I just had to keep an eye on them. And so there was like this little office right next to these 2 enormous boilers. And it's just, no one told me to do these things. It's just my natural ascetic sensibility that I would go and sit on something like this, not as comfortable as this, I have to say, but right next to these boilers when they were running. So it was very, very hot and very noisy. But I would go and do my meditation there. I don't know. My father said to me one time, I love this man a lot, but I think sometimes he got tired of my strange behavior, but it wasn't strange to irritate him. It just was like that. And he said to me, Michael, you're odd. You don't fit in, you're odd. And that, from him, disturbed me a little bit. And I went to my sister and I said, Sandra, do you think I'm odd? She said, Michael, we all think you're odd. And that kind of relaxed me because, okay, then it's not just something I'm doing against my father, it's how people see me as being odd is a bit strong, but just out of step. What I was interested in was not what they were interested in. And so I, certainly not being a bhikkhu, but I became a meditator and I wanted to not be dependent upon anything. So I learned, when I began, of course, I had cushions and I had a shawl, and I needed Buddha statues and incense and all the little ceremonial things. But in the end, I began to recognize, well, these are something that I have to carry with me. Even if it's just as an idea, well, I can't possibly meditate now because I don't have my cushion. Or I can't meditate now because the Buddha isn't here. Or I can't meditate because I don't have any incense. So, or my shawl. So over time, I began to let these things go, and I learned to sit, flat, which means that I can sit. This was the whole idea of it, that I could sit anywhere. I didn't need special conditions. I just needed something to sit on. So I could sit on the floor or on a table if that's what was required, or I could sit. Cushions I don't like very much. I prefer something much firmer than something soft. So I renounced that comfort, and I think that stood me in good stead. So that's one part of Nekhamma. But bhikkhu means meditator. It also means a renunciate, that someone who has given up the worldly life and is dependent then upon the kindness and generosity of others. And that's pretty much where I am now, and I feel very grateful for that, that I meet people like you who take such excellent care of me, and thank you very much for all of that. But it is not to be reliant upon certain things like a job, like a full-time job, and certain amounts of money, because I'm so involved in the world with having I don't know how you call it in Germany, what we used to call at least HP, that you buy something little by little, week by week, that you or like your mortgage or a car, or then anything else, any kind of furniture. So the second meaning of bhikkhu is someone who lives through the generosity of others, and I like that simplicity as well. It fits me very well. And then the third meaning of bhikkhu is someone who has no fixed place to live. So there's not a place where you say, that's my home, or that's my house. Well, I definitely do have that. We have our own little house in a small town in France. And I'm very happy for that. Actually, I quite like that. I like and if I was in the Burmese tradition, which I'm not really, only my teacher was, but I'm not, I would be a sayadaw, because I would be the master of a small a vihara, really. But you can call me sayadaw, but I'm not really a sayadaw. Although I have this title Dhammacharya, but nobody calls me that either. So that's what bhikkhu means. So when the Buddha organized this bhikkhu sangha and the bhikkhuni sangha, it was to renounce the world. It was to come away from the city life, from family life, from entertainments. One of the rules that the Buddha gave to his monks is, you're not to be involved in entertainments. You're not to go and watch pot blowing. And so I read this in the sutras, and I asked my teacher, what is pot blowing? And he said, we don't know. Whatever it was died, its popularity died out a long time ago, and so we never found out what it was. But now I really would quite like to go and see it, whatever it is. Anyway, so we don't know that. But all these things over time have fallen away, and monks, that the life of monks now is very different. That monks do go and see sporting events, they do become involved in politics. They have, in Buddhist countries, they have a lot of influence. In Burma now, there's a lot of influence from Buddhist monks, and it's not very good. So if we look at our life, then, what does renunciation, what does Nekhamma really mean? And it means that we give up. So this is, as I've been saying, this is about the nuance and the subtlety of the understanding. What does it really mean? You don't, to follow a Dharma path, you don't have to become monks and nuns. You don't have to shave your heads and wear these simple orange robes. You don't have to do that. At some point, you have to renounce, and not all at once. As I said last night, it's not like cutting your arm off. You don't have to do something dramatic like that. And not even cutting even the end of your little finger off, like they do in the Japanese gangster movies, just to cut this little final part off. You don't have to do any of that. and which in fact would be easier than what you do have to cut off, which is your attraction and your fascination and your identification to that world out there. That's what you're renouncing, your identification that this is who I am, and then taking your self-identification from the things that you do. When we ask, if I was to ask any of you, so what do you do? You say, I'm this, or I'm that, or something. That's not what you are. That's only what you do. You say, I'm a surgeon. Well, that's not what you are, that's what you do. And you only do that in different moments. And I'm a yoga teacher. That's not what you are, it's what you do. And etc., etc. And we get caught up with that. And as long as we're caught up with that, then we're caught up in this ever-declining spiral, which begins to influence every part of our life. How could I do such a thing? But I'm a yoga teacher. How could I do? It doesn't make any sense. That we get caught up in this idea of identities. Well, all those identities come from outside, or they're being reinforced from outside. In reality, there is nothing that you really are. Nothing. You are, or we all are together, fellow human beings. But in different moments, we take on different roles. Right now, sitting here, I'm the teacher. But in front of my children, I'm the father. In front of my partner, I'm very often the idiot husband. So I'm just, but seriously, when you look for something substantial as to what you are, you don't find anything. You don't find anything that isn't in this constant process of change called anicca. Because there's nothing that you really are, then there's no way you have to be. All you have to remember is you're free. You always were free, you always will be free, and you're free right now. And you're free to do anything you want to do, anything. The only thing you have to remember is there's a consequence to that. That's all, the only thing you have to remember. If you are a mother with 11 children, how awful that must be, but if you are a mother with 11 children, you can stand up and walk out and never see any of them again. You're free to do that. Whether you do it or not is something for you to decide. So many, many, many years ago, yes, a long time ago, I was teaching on the Isle of Man at the Isle of Man Buddhist group, and it was nice. I was learning, I was studying hard with Dharma. I was telling people to meditate for an hour a day. That was the tradition in those days, that we would sit in our segments. And because I was telling them, telling is a bit strong, but advising them, you should sit for an hour a day. So I was sitting for 2.5 hours a day. And I was sitting in the morning for an hour, in the evening for an hour, and then half an hour at work at lunchtime. This is when I worked in the factory. Again, another very noisy environment. But I don't know, it didn't seem to disturb me very much, so it was okay. And I was the leader of this Isle of Man Buddhist group. And then one day, my sister, who suffers with chronic pain, so she was doing a fundraiser for chronic pain sufferers. So, and she said, will you come? It was like a big charity night somewhere. And she said, will you come? To support. You buy your ticket for £5 or whatever it is, and that money goes to the charity. And I said, yes, of course I'll come. And so I went, and it was okay. It was in like a big bar. And there were lots of people there, and I didn't really know anybody, but there were a couple of people that, I didn't go there, I went by myself, so I didn't really go with a group of people. But there were a couple of people there, and they had a karaoke. Now, to get up and sing in front of people would never occur to me. But the people who were there, who knew me from the days when I used to play in a rock and roll band on the Isle of Man, and I was the singer of that. So they said, so you will obviously get up and sing on this karaoke. And eventually I said, I don't want to sound too reluctant, but I just gave up fighting. I said, yes, okay. And there were 2 young women there who I didn't know at all, But they said, "Oh, we'll come and back you." I said, "All right." So we went up, and the song I chose was, it's a really lovely song, and I play it often on my guitar at home, and it's pretty old now, and so you may not know it at all. But it's called "Save the Last Dance for Me." It's a nice song. Maybe when we stop recording, I'll sing it for you. So we got up, and I sang the lead. Oh, you can dance, and then they were saying, "You can dance." So they were behind. It was quite lovely. But then, so that was my turn. So that's fine. I finished, and I got down off the stage area, or wherever the karaoke machine was, and it's a bar. So I'm not so interested. I'd gone, I'd shown up, I'd given my donation, and so I left quite soon after that. What I didn't realize was that the competition was, the karaoke singing was a competition. And we won. But I wasn't there. And what we won was apparently this enormous box of chocolates. You know what? I didn't see one. Not one chocolate came my way. But it was fun, actually. In the end, it was quite fun. And then I was telling my friend who was helping me run the Buddhist group. And they said, "Oh, you know, this thing happened. I went to support my sister and the pain relief, or whatever the charity was called. And there was a karaoke machine, and I went up and I sang a song. And he was so shocked. He was outraged because his view of me was very narrow. And he said, "You shouldn't do that. You're a Dharma teacher. No, you're a Vipassana teacher. You shouldn't do that. You're a Vipassana teacher. You bring Vipassana into disrepute." I don't think I did that. I just sang a song. But that's the point. We just do something that seems appropriate in the moment, but there's nothing behind it. I wasn't trying to become the next international singing star on the Isle of Man. I just did it and went home. So renouncing is not necessarily renouncing what you're doing, but your identification with it. So how can I do these things? I'm somebody special. I'm a Vipassana teacher, but I never had that thought, ever. It is true that more and more, as I, without even reflecting upon it, but as I more and more continued this Nekhamma, this renunciation of the world, which now is really quite strong. I don't really do anything. I'm really something of a, if not a hermit, then definitely a recluse. The world does not attract me at all. There isn't anything that when I come here and people take such great care of me, then I enjoy that. But it's not something I look for either. And so this renunciation gradually over time became more and more. But in that moment, I wasn't hanging on to some idea of who and what I was, therefore my behavior should be a certain way. And even now, whatever my behavior is, it's quite spontaneous. When I was talking about sila, just a little bit earlier, perhaps I could say that there are two kinds of morality. One is following the rules. Well, that's how we start. We follow the rules. We follow the rules of morality, which say, if you want the best thing for you, then live a good life. What does that mean? Well, that you don't harm anyone, you don't steal, you don't abuse others, you don't use your speech in cruel and harmful ways, and you don't take drugs. That is an extremely oversimplification, but you know what I'm saying. So that's the sila. But the other part of that is that ultimately our morality, our way to live in the world, must become spontaneous, where you're not thinking, well, which precept is this, or what should I do in this situation? That the heart itself is pure, and so you're just manifesting that purity all the time. And so it's said that whoever is living, following these precepts, is living the life that an awakened being spontaneously lives. So that's the rules are only there as long as we don't know how to live, and they're guidelines for us. But ultimately, we have the heart that knows how to live. There's this argument from theists, from people who believe in God, who will say to you, well, if you don't believe in God, who is who's stopping you from killing people or raping women or doing this? Well, me. I don't feel the need to do any of those things, and I don't need the threat of being punished to burn in hell evermore. I don't need the threat of those things to stop me behaving in what we might call an immoral way. So when the heart opens, our way to be in the world is a beautiful but natural morality, where we're just kind. The Master says, I am kind to those who are kind to me. I'm kind to those who are not kind to me. I'm kind. And that's how the heart manifests. But all that kindness, of course, all these things are always interconnected. And I will go backwards and forwards, and like now I'm talking about morality. But there is a very famous story which you know very well because I've told you so many times, but I'll make it very quick, make it very short. Two monks were walking on a road after a huge storm, and they go around a bend in the road, and the road is completely flooded. And standing on this side of this dirty, muddy water is a young and attractive woman who obviously has to pass through this water, but doesn't want to get her clothes dirty. And so the two monks are walking together, and one of the monks sees this young woman, and without even speaking, he sweeps her up in his arms and carries her through this dirty, muddy water and puts her down on the other side. The other monk follows them through, and his head is down, and he's almost grumbling to himself, always muttering to himself. And then the two monks meet up. The young woman says, thank you very much. The monk who carried her said, that's fine, no need to mention it. And again, that's Dana. No need to mention it. No need to say anything. It's my privilege. I'm able to help a fellow human being. So the lady went on her way, and the monks walked to where they were going to stay that night, which is the local monastery. So they walked, but they walked in silence. But one of the monks is walking with his head up, he's looking around, he's seeing the mountains and the flowers and the valleys and whatever else. And the other monk is walking with his head down. And he's so disturbed by what happened that he's thinking to himself, how could he have done this? We have a rule. We have a rule which says we're not supposed to even look at women. Never mind pick them up and carry them. We're not supposed to do that. That's not the rule, by the way. It's just like a misunderstanding of the rule. The actual rule is, if you want to know, that a monk should not touch a woman with lust. Monks are supposed to be celibate, not have any sexual activity. And so if you have sexual desire, don't go near women. Just take a break. Go and walk in the other direction. It's really practical. But the idea that you shouldn't touch women. When I was a monk, I was training, I had a friend called, a fellow monk called Bodhidharma. And we were traveling to give a talk in another town called Shrewsbury, which I've told you the story of how we stayed at a woman's house and she hated us. She was so angry. I don't blame her either. I don't blame her, not at all. Her husband should have told her, there's two very strange men coming to stay here tonight. But he didn't mention it until we just arrived at the door and she was ironing. So we were on this bus, and he said to me, now, Bodhidharma, who is someone, of course, I like so much, but he is half English and half Italian. His mother is Italian, and his father was an English, I think, school teacher, something like that. And so he was concerned, and he said, there's a monk's rule which says a monk should not be touched by a woman, or a monk should not touch a woman. I said, yeah, okay, that's not really the rule, but okay. And he said, but when I go home to visit my mother, she jumps all over me and smothers me with kisses. What can I do? I thought, why would you want to do anything? It's your mother. Give her this. Allow her to show her affection to her son. And the rule is you should not touch a woman with sexual desire. So presumably, we don't have that for our parents. So it's fine. And we have to know how to, the part of Nekhamma, that we renounce our attraction to the world while still living in the world. So sometimes things are appropriate and they don't mean anything. This monk picked up this young woman and walked through the water with her and put her down. And then the other monk walked through, and all of the time his mind is going round and round. You should not have done this. We have a rule which says you shouldn't do this. You're breaking the rules, and if you break the rules, then you make me vulnerable because I think the rules are so important, and yet you can break them, so I don't know what to do now. I feel betrayed by you this is going, you know these voices in your head, so this is going around in his head. Until finally they get to almost to the gates of the monastery where they're going to stay the night, and this second monk said, "Oh, stop, I have to speak." Well, of course you don't. I already spoke about right speech. Or wrong speech, you don't have to say anything. But he said, I have to speak. We monks are not even supposed to look at young and beautiful women, never mind to pick them up and carry them. Why did you do that? And this other monk said, this beautiful, beautiful thing. I know this is a classic story and you know the end of it very well, but it's such a powerful Dharma teaching. He said, I left that young woman standing by the water. Do you still carry her? That's what we do in our life. We carry the past with us. We carry the world with us. We carry the idea of what people may think about us. We carry the ideas of social status and progress and who we are and how we appear to others. And all of those things, as with everything else, is empty. It's all completely empty. So what we're announcing with Nekhamma is not the world in the sense of we have to become a monk or a nun, but we have to renounce, we have to let go of our attraction and our identification with that world out there. Because the one thing it does not bring you is happiness, or lasting happiness. Moments of happiness, yes. But the nature of all phenomena is to be impermanent, so everything's changing. The thing that, it's strange that people can get married, and the reason usually for getting married is that we have a love story. So we fall in love with someone, and this woman or this man in our life is, the being that we want to spend all our time with. And that's at the beginning of a relationship. And then it changes. Well, it has to change because that's going to be awful. It's going to be oppressive that you're together all the time in every situation. But then sometimes it goes even further, and people get divorced. And that action through divorce is suddenly, I loved someone, I loved them enough to share my life with them, to get married, to share all my finances with them and everything else. And now I hate him or I hate her, and I'm going to destroy her if that's possible. And if she wants the children, then I'm going to take them away from her. If he wants the children, I'm going to take that. This venom can suddenly appear, and it's always about an attachment to something, and everything you're attached to is going to hurt you. So when we talk about renunciation, that's what we're speaking about, renouncing these things that only take us to suffering. The world is everything out there distracts you from your Dharma life. All of it. Even if you see a movie about a Dharma hero or something, Gandhi, for example, you're still watching a movie. You're still not practicing. You're just watching a movie. And when you commit to that world, to living in that world, then you are leaving something behind of the Dharma world. So you have to at least find that balance of which is, where do I want to put my attention? When you're at work, you should give your attention to your work, especially when you have skilled work like you have. You should give your attention to that work, but not to make. I don't want to tell you what to do. This is only how the 10 perfections. This is what the endless rebirths of Gautama, the Buddha, beginning with Sumedha, had to do. And he had to pass through all these different learning moments. As long as I'm dependent upon cushions and shawls and incense and Buddha statues and flowers and everything else for my meditation, then I'm a victim. Because then I think I can't meditate unless I have those things. So we learn to let go of all of them until we're not exactly sitting naked in the snow, but that we don't need props for our practice. And the same with our life. If I need you to be a certain way so I can be happy, then I'm still a victim because you're not always the way I want you to be. So we renounce that. We renounce that attachment. That's what we're doing all the time on our Dharma journey. When we see the nature of the mind, we say, I always do that. What do I need to do to change it so I'm not a victim? So each moment becomes a new moment. Well, the only way that's going to happen, that each moment is a new moment rather than a repetition of an old moment, is to let go of the past. Because it's the past that keeps coming up. You see it, you act on it, and it goes down again, and it comes round again sometime later. And we used to have when we used to have CDs, there was a picture on one of the CDs that Isabel actually designed, and it was like a Chinese monk sitting like this. And because of special effects on the computer, it had these lights, this light coming down. And when I saw it, I thought, oh yes, that's perfect. That's really so good, because that's exactly how understanding arises. It's like a light going on in the darkness of your mind. It's like Dipankara suddenly, this bringer of light, suddenly standing in front of you, and everything's illuminated. And there's that feeling of, yes, I always do that. In that kind of situation, I always do that. And once you've seen it, that's when you can take some control. When you've seen it, that's when you can just make that. First of all, it's a choice that I'm not going to be a victim anymore. I'm going to live in a different way. I'm going to begin to live in a different way. I'm going to begin to live a life of generosity, because I have so much, so I'm going to start to share it. But with dana also, you have to remember not to give everything away. You have to take care of yourself. Make sure you have enough to eat and enough clothes to wear and a nice place to live as much as you can. So you also have to have dana for yourself. And then morality, that you have to live a simple but comfortable life where your presence brings something of value to the world that you're part of. And then Nekhamma, where you're letting go of your reliance on that world out there. I just use the windows, of course, but that world out there called samsara, the world of birth and death. So your reliance on that to bring you happiness. And that's what the bhikkhu and bhikkhuni sangha was originally, that monks and nuns, they would live in monasteries, but I should do monasteries, because they're not really, as we understand, monasteries now are wonderful. They're like hotels. In those days, at best, it was just a few little huts that men and women could sleep away from the elements, that's all. But that very simplicity, and I think with me, that's what was the attraction, that almost ascetic style, that appealed to me. And so I followed that, really. And some of it, I spent nights sleeping in a garden shed. It was so small, and I'm not very tall, but I had to sleep diagonally on, I don't know, who knows what. I wasn't homeless, but I was staying with some people, and they didn't have any room in their house. And it was summer. I mean, it wasn't like here with snow or on the ground. But that appealed to me. So for me, according to my karma, to let go of the world is not very difficult. There's this story that I think very well, but all these different moments. I think my Dharma life has been very much of a blessing, because I never looked for anything very much. Everything just seemed to present itself in front of me. And one time, it was the first time actually, Isabel came to stay on the Isle of Man. And I had this little television that had a video thing at the bottom. And so you could record things through the television instead of having something separate. And so I didn't know how to use it. But Isabel set it all up for me. And it was a Sunday evening, and I was going to give a talk somewhere, so she was coming with me. And she programmed it so it's, 9 o'clock or something like that. It would come on and start to record what was, in those days, my favorite program, which was called The West Wing. I liked it very much. So we went, gave the talk, came back, took a cup of tea, went up to watch this program, pressed TV, didn't come on. Nothing happened. And as we'd gone out earlier, 2.5 hours earlier, Isabel had walked past the switch where it was plugged in and turned it off. And of course, she was very apologetic. Oh, I'm so sorry. And it really was clear to me as anything else. It's just television. I like it, but it's just television. It doesn't really mean anything. And that's the way the renunciation works. That if you can have a pleasurable experience, you go to eat a meal in a nice restaurant, that's lovely. If you can do that, that's lovely. But it's not something that you need to make you feel fulfilled in your life. to have a nice meal, or anything else actually, that what the world offers is transient at best. And so you can enjoy it if it's pleasurable, and if it's not enjoyable or not pleasurable, then you can be with it till it passes, because it will change. Whatever's happening, it's going to change. You're not stuck in your life. Everything is changing anyway. The difficulty you might meet is when you don't like those changes. When the Buddha was speaking about dukkha, or say suffering for simplicity, but unsatisfactoriness, he said there are three kinds of dukkha. The first one is called dukkha, and it's there's difficulties we meet simply through having this body and through having this life that this body needs. So very simply, we pass through old age, sickness, and then finally death. And if you don't want to get old, then you're suffering, because if you don't die, that's what's going to happen. And as the body deteriorates, you meet more difficult things. It's harder to. The floor seems to be an awful long way down when you have to tie your shoelaces or something. And now, for me, I'm quite old, but when I have to go down to tie my shoelaces, I have a little look around the floor to see if there's anything else I can do while I'm down there. Because it takes a while then to get back up again. But it is like that, and it's okay. It's okay, provided you don't mind. Not to mind is to be in harmony with the nature of this body. And the mind itself, that this is not particularly true, but the idea that I should only have pleasant thoughts. Well, who is that person that only ever has pleasant thoughts? We meet our fears and our anxieties and our stresses, and that creates an image in the mind of how life should be if it was only perfect all the time. So the Buddha said that, there are three kinds of suffering. The first one is called dukkha. It's connected to the body. The suffering or the struggle or the unsatisfactoriness we meet being so closely identified with something that we really don't control. We don't control it. And that's, part of Nekhamma. So you renounce that idea that this is my body. It's not that you make a statement like, I renounce, but through our ongoing practice of wisdom, through our vipassana practice, that we see that, okay, I don't control this body, but I can take care of it, like a car. I can make sure it has the best essence or petrol or whatever you call it, forget now, the fuel that you need. And I can take care of it, make sure it's clean and it doesn't get rusty and all these different things. I can take care of it, but in the end, what's happening is happening and it's beyond my control. So that was the first one, dukkha. The second one is called viparinama dukkha. Viparinama dukkha is the difficulty we meet because things are always changing and we don't always like it. Sometimes we like the things that change, that's very good. But if something we don't like changes to something we like, then comes the stress of hoping, or at least trying, to influence the situation so this thing that's just changed doesn't change again. Because we can't control that. So we renounce our identification with that things shouldn't change or things shouldn't be the way they are. And so, we have this suffering of the truth of anicca, that things are arising and passing away in an endless stream, from a beginningless beginning to an endless end. And we're also part of that. We're not outside observing the changes. This being itself is always changing. I've already spoken about this, that there's nothing that you really are. There's no one thing. There's no one Kanya. There's no one Belarus. There's no one Martin. There's no one Holger. It's not one thing. So I'm going to presume you understand this quite well, that should you ever look at social media and you see people saying, I don't want to mention any names, but popular people, best-selling authors of pseudo-spirituality saying, you are your awareness. No, you're not. I've already told you, there's nothing that you really are. You are not your awareness. Awareness arises and passes away with every other phenomenon in the universe. It's not different. You have a moment of awareness arising with a thought or a mood or a feeling or an emotion, and that's how you know it. But there's not one stream of awareness that we can call you. We call this stream of awareness Kenya. No, no. It's a million fragmented pieces of awareness arising, passing away, arising, passing away. So this is Parinama Dukkha. The difficulty we meet because things are changing. And then the last one is called Sankhara Dukkha. And Sankhara Dukkha, very, very simply, means the suffering we experience or the difficulties we experience simply by not being enlightened or awakened. Once that moment of awakening comes, then you see everything as it really is. You don't have to struggle anymore. You're in harmony with anicca, impermanence. You're in harmony with anatta, the emptiness of a permanent or fixed self-identity. You're in harmony with dukkha, difficulties or suffering or unsatisfactoriness. But you're in harmony with that. So there's no struggle and there's no fight, because you will have by that time renounced the idea of self. I already said all the difficulties come from this idea of self. I need the world to be a certain way. I need people to be a certain way. I need life to be a certain way. Why? Why? Why do you need life to be a certain way or people to be a particular way in different moments? Now, broadly speaking, we say, well, so I can be happy. It's a little bit more subtle than that. It's so I can feel comfortable in my life, so I don't feel threatened, or I don't feel that people can take advantage of me, that I feel secure in my own life, and that things that threaten that security should be kept a long way away from me. But they're not. They're around you all the time. People who don't agree with you, people who don't like the way you look, or the way you dress, or the way you work, that's around us all the time. You know, even the Buddha was criticized. Of course he was. By people, and criticism mostly is kind of through jealousy. But, the Buddha was criticized, even to the point of, you know, people trying to kill him and destroy his reputation. My teacher I heard my teacher criticized. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was listening to. But then I realized, oh, this is saying more about the person making the criticism than it is about my teacher. So, you know, then it changes. There's a compassion. And of course, I've been criticized enough times. Well, of course I have. So this is the third of the 10 perfections, the Nekhamma, the renunciation. And so then I think I offer this to you this afternoon for your consideration, your reflection. May you all be well and happy.